All right, check this one out, y'all. OF model executes alleged, well, we're live on TikTok, so I can't say that word, but guy that did something to her that she didn't want in cold blood. Apparently that's what happened. We're going to find out. Make sure you like the video. Subscribe if you're new. My name is Patrick. If you like true crime, we're live every single night. TikTok, hit the follow button if you're new here. And let's go. Let's just jump right into this.
A Coast Guard veteran turned OnlyFans model pleads
only hams?
guilty to a murder in a national park. The man she executed is someone she accused of her. This is a story with a lot of layers, twists, and shows the lengths that people will go to get what they think is revenge. This is a story with a lot to unpack, not just an unpacking an execution-style murder in a national park, but
right? Oh my God, this is escalating quickly.
A lot to unpack when you look at the person who's responsible for it. The name of that person is Chelsea Perkins. She's 35 years old. She's from Alexandria, Virginia, which is not far from Washington, D.C. She's a veteran of the United States Coast Guard. Chelsea Perkins may be her government name, but in the online world, she is known by a different one. That name is Selena Savage, and she's no longer in the Coast Guard. She was a model who posted content on the website
on the website Only Clams. It's a restaurant where they serve nothing but clams. Clam chowder, clam soup. I think that's clam chowder. Anyways, let's keep going.
OnlyFans. That's the subscription-based site where creators can post content and then charge users for access. And many of the accounts can have very risque content.
Many of the accounts can have risque content? What? Come on. I mean, I guess that's a very PG way of saying it.
To say the least. On Instagram, Perkins identified herself as a cam model. Perkins' last post on Instagram was on December 9th, 2021. I want you to remember that date. I will bring that up in just a moment. Earlier in that year, 2021, on March 6th, Perkins drove to Ohio to meet 31-year-old Matthew Dunmire. According to court documents, Dunmire and Perkins go way back. They both went to the same high school. Heading into the weekend, Dunmire had told a friend that he was going to meet up with a woman who was in town for the weekend. In fact, his boss saw him get into a car with a woman, and that woman was driving a white car. On March 6th, the two, Dunmire and Perkins, went for a walk in Cuyahoga Valley National Park. That is a beautiful park. Take a look at some of the views. Just a quiet place where people in Ohio can get away from the hustle and bustle of Cleveland and Akron in the Northeast.
Ohio?
How dare you!
Oh no.
Part of the state. On March 9th, a few days later, around 11 o'clock in the morning, hikers found Dunmire dead. He had a single gunshot wound to his head. At the time, Perkins...
Oh my God.
Was nowhere to be found. During the investigation, police did speak to some hikers who were in the park, and they remember on the day that Matthew was murdered, they heard a gunshot. And not just that, they passed a woman who was later identified as Perkins, who seemed lost in the woods. And on top of that, they noted it was odd that she was wearing knee-high boots walking around a national park. Not exactly something you would wear when you go for a hike. Now, Perkins eventually made her way out of the park and then drove across state lines to Michigan to a tattoo parlor. Eventually, she drove back home across state lines again to Virginia, where her husband lived and also owned. What the fuck?
Husband? Oh no.
You what?
Oh no. Why was she going to meet this dude in a national park?
The white car that Matthew's boss saw.
Oh no, she was trying to see his Mount Rushmore.
What? Him getting into before his murder. It took several months to arrest Chelsea Perkins. Police say eventually they were able to line up Matthew's cell phone data with the location of an Airbnb rental that Perkins had booked for the weekend that she was in Ohio. Also, Perkins' DNA showed up on Matthew's body, as well as on a water bottle that was near his body after she shot him in the back of the head. Now, Perkins,
oh my God,
was arrested December 10th, 2021. Remember, I told you to remember December 9th.
Oh, she got on that site in 2021. Oh man, if you hadn't went crazy and done this, she'd probably be worth like $150 million now. This is crazy. By the way, TikTok, come over to YouTube so you can watch this video. The Mystery Project on YouTube. Come subscribe right now. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit the thumbs up button. We only have 9 likes. Come on, y'all. Let's get at least 50.
Of that year, because that was the last day that Selena Savage posted on Instagram. As I'm reading you these details, you're probably thinking to yourself, what took the authorities so long to arrest Chelsea Perkins? Because the evidence just really lines up, certainly in hindsight. But during the 5 months the investigation went on, this story took an even more shocking turn. A little more than a month before Perkins was arrested, a woman was shot in Northeast Washington, D.C., and the shooter, according to the Justice Department, wore a brown vest and brown baseball cap and carried a cardboard box to the door of the home, and they knocked on the front door and shouted, "UPS!" They then shot the woman who answered the door.
Oh, no.
This was the shooter. Her name was Tommy Lynn Dunmire. She is the
Oh, no, it's his mom. The mom went and took out the girl?
mother of Chelsea Perkins' murder victim, Matthew Dunmire. Government prosecutors say that Tommy Lynn and her longtime partner, John McQuillan, drove to a house in Washington with the intent of shooting Chelsea Perkins. The couple had grown frustrated by November that no one had been arrested for their son's murder, and they decided to take matters into their own hands. The problem...
Man, they said, we got a package for her.
problem was the person who Tommy Lynn shot was not Chelsea Perkins. It was a woman who had nothing to do with her son's murder.
Oh my God. That is crazy. That's nuts. Just some random person opens the door. Boom.
Now, the good news was that shooting victim survived. Tommy Lynn and her partner, John McQuillan, then tried to escape by changing the license plates on their car. Police still caught up to them, and at that point, they say Tommy Lynn took her own life. John McQuillan acted as the getaway driver for Tommy Lynn, his longtime partner, and even though she passed away, John McQuillan eventually pleaded guilty to charges related to his role in what happened with Tommy Lynn shooting this woman as she was dressed like a UPS driver. He was sentenced in 2022 to 3 years in federal prison. Perkins,
for driving,
no longer lived in Washington, D.C. at the time that Matthew's parents...
So it was just some random lady that lived at the address? And some lady just went, oh, UPS, boom. Thank gosh she lived, though. That is crazy.
Went to try and kill her under the disguise of being that delivery driver. Perkins was arrested in December, about a month after that shooting in Pensacola, Florida, about 5 months after she shot Matthew Dunmire in the head in that park in Ohio. Court records show that the motive for the murder of Matthew Dunmire was in the minds of Perkins.
All three of them. Should she get charged for him, obviously? Should she get charged for the attempted one of the other person and the mom's?
Perkins' revenge. Court records show that she accused...
That is a crazy picture right there.
accused Dunmire of rape in 2017.
Grapes. Oh, hell. TikTok, if it shuts down, the Mystery Project on YouTube.
The Cleveland Plain Dealer in Ohio says that police in Virginia Beach, where Perkins claimed this rape happened, didn't have enough evidence to support a charge. On May 27th of this year, Perkins pleaded guilty to driving more than 300 miles across state lines and killing Matthew Dunmire. She pleaded guilty to a charge of second-degree murder.
Oh my word.
Now it will be up to the court to accept her plea. She is set to be sentenced on September 9th, 2025. She faces between 20 and 25 years in prison. Joining us now to break this case down is retired Judge Fanon Rucker. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us on this one. I want to start with the motive that authorities believe was at the center of this case. You have Chelsea Perkins accusing the victim, Matthew Dunmire, of rape in 2017. But there wasn't an arrest that was made. He was never charged with rape. Now that she's accepted a plea, you see how all of this played out. How do those type of factors go into the plea arrangement that can be made? And if the system shows any sympathy to Chelsea Perkins, believing that maybe it could have happened, though there wasn't enough evidence to make an arrest.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, as you say, to talk about this most unusual case. I always say that there are no boring days in our court systems. So when you ask the question of what impact could potential motive have on the ultimate outcome, and that really comes to sentencing or even on plea deals, it has a significant amount of impact. So what we know is whenever a person is sentenced, as judges, we ask for mitigation. Mitigation are those circumstances or those factors which will help to lower or to reduce the amount of time that a person or the heavy consequence that a person may face. For instance, when people are facing the death penalty and they ask for a mitigation hearing or they ask for mitigating circumstances, that could be that the person was abused when they were a child, that they grew up under circumstances where, they had parents who abused drugs and they gave them drugs, or they were in poverty. So mitigation are any circumstances and factors which could reduce the heinousness of a person's actions. So here, Perkins alleged that 4 years prior, while they were in high school, that this individual raped her.
Great.
They investigated it, but didn't find enough evidence to justify an arrest.
So hold on. Okay, so wait a second. So to me, in the beginning, it sounded like she was setting up a meeting with this guy, or like they were just meeting up to do whatever, do what lovers do, right? But with what he just said, it sounds like she said she found him and set it up and just wanted to meet him for this, because she said that he just said that it happened back in high school.
The problem for her, which makes it aggravating as opposed to mitigating, is that this was 4 years. There was 4 years of contemplation. There was 4 years of thinking about it. There was 4 years of coming up with some type of way to mete out punishment in her eyes against someone who did something bad to her, and decidedly very bad 4 years prior, if it's proven to be true. The problem also is aggravating that she sought this person out while she was married, and
that is nuts.
She set up a meetup. I mean, it was some very deliberate action. This wasn't that she happened to see him somewhere and all of a sudden all the feelings welled up in her and she responded. This was very deliberate and calculating. So I'm not sure that the mitigating circumstances are going to outweigh the aggravating circumstances, even assuming that her claim that he attacked her sexually 4 years prior.
Nuts.
Why was this a federal case?
Cross state lines.
This was a federal case because the act happened on federal grounds. She was charged with.
Oh, that makes sense too, because it was a federal park. It was a national park.
Using a firearm in an act of violence on federal property, because the park where this happened is actually federal property. I will offer to you that because it happened there, she could also have faced state charges, but I don't know if there was some communication between the state authorities and the federal authorities, and they agreed to allow the federal authorities to take the case because of perhaps a greater sentence or consequences that she engaged. I mean, we also know that she used social media. She traveled from one state to the other. I mean, all of those are circumstances which could implicate federal allegations or federal charges.
What do you make of, and it's easy in hindsight to look at the evidence and to say, well, why wasn't this person just arrested the next day? But it was DNA that helped kind of link it together, but it took 5 months to make an arrest. Why does it in some of these cases take so long for someone to be brought into custody?
An interesting question. And, sometimes we see that it's not just 4 months. Sometimes we do see an immediate arrest, but sometimes we see months or even years, decades, sometimes that people are arrested.
Dear God.
After an initial criminal act, murder is actually committed. Here, I have to say that this was some pretty incredible and diligent investigative and police work in order to identify and charge Perkins in this case. I mean, there were no direct witnesses at the time that this incident happened, so that would militate against an immediate arrest. The detectives interviewed his friends, and his friends told him that he was about to meet up with someone, and they got GPS information. And then once they had her as a suspect, they went back through social media and they looked at the car that was registered. It was actually registered in Virginia, where she was from. It was registered in her husband's name. I mean, that's some pretty diligent police work. Now, we'll offer.
But the dude's mom found an old address like that and said, "Man, this is crazy. We know where she is," and went over there and ended up shooting the wrong person. Oh, hell.
To you also that the federal system has a much higher conviction rate than most state systems. So in state systems, I can tell you in Ohio, particularly in our county, the charges will go forward to the state. They'll indict the person after the review, and there may be, a 50 to 60% conviction rate. When I was a prosecutor and when I was actually working for a federal magistrate, it was my first job out of law school, actually while I was in law school, but the federal conviction rate was in the 90s. They're careful about what cases they bring. They're very diligent and careful before they present their evidence to the grand jury. And by the time they go to trial or they're able to work out a plea, it's because they have meticulously looked at the evidence and have presented an airtight case. And this is the result. So 4 months between the act being committed and her arrest, I would argue is not that long. I will tell you, it originally when I looked at it, it said this happened in 2021. I thought that this is 2025. There must have been a delay in finding her. No, the case has just been winding through the court system for the past 4 years. There was only a 4-month delay between her committing this murder and them charging her with enough evidence to substantiate the conviction or the plea here.
Whoa.
Right, because she was arrested December 2021, and it was just last week, as we're recording it now, that she accepted this plea deal. Before we get to the plea deal and what goes into whether it actually ends up being accepted, I want to talk about the other shooting that happened related to this case, which was the victim, Matthew Dunmire.
Oh yeah, the mom.
And it's a incredible family tragedy in this as well. To just see how kind of all of this played out. How common is it? How often have you seen in your career where you have, as an investigation goes on and maybe a family gets frustrated and they try to take matters into their own hands?
Well, and there's such an irony here. But before I talk about kind of the frequency of it, think about what happened here. She claims that in high school she was raped by this individual. After several months, it was investigated and they didn't charge. And so several years later, she sought out and killed the person who she claims did something to her. Well, the irony is Dunmire's parents knew, because they had her as a suspect in this case, knew that she was likely the one that killed their son, but they didn't arrest her yet. And they were so distraught or so angry over the fact that she had not been held for consequences of committing murder of their son that they took it on their own to drive out, find her and drive out to Virginia, shoot somebody they thought was her that turned out wasn't her. And in fact, her mother tragically took her own life when the authorities began to close in on the two of them. I mean,
that is crazy.
What a movie. Now, how frequently did I see that? Very rarely. Very rarely. I mean, certainly we see and we talk about street justice being meted out when there are crimes that happen. And we know there's this kind of street code in a lot of instances where nobody talks when detectives and police come asking questions because the streets are going to handle it themselves. Now, that's not an uncommonly known dynamic, but I can tell you that those cases don't often make it to court, at least not that we're aware. We know that, there are relationship killings, but we don't hear very often that those relationships killings are in retaliation because the court system isn't working right or the police haven't picked up folks. A lot of times the police don't know, the streets know long before the police know who actually committed a murder.
And in this case, the Matthew Dunmire's mom dressing as a UPS driver, delivery person showing up at the house. I mean,
that's crazy.
It's movie-like in some ways, but certainly in this case, a woman that had nothing to do with this case ends up getting hurt, and then the mom ends up taking her own life. How do you, and maybe when you were a prosecutor, and I'm sure you have victims' families, and they are frustrated with the legal system not working as quickly as maybe they thought it would, what do you tell a family to sit tight as things are playing out so they don't end up doing something, even for as rare as it is, like what we saw Matthew Dunmire's family do?
Well, I can speak to that issue not only as a prosecutor, but more currently with the type of work that I do now. I mean, I handle cases involving the wrongful death of individuals through deliberate or accidental means. I deal with cases where individuals' lives have been taken tragically by police officers or by shopkeepers. And it's the same thing that I would tell individuals as a prosecutor. And that is, I know that this process is a slow process. I know that nothing is happening as quickly as you want it to, and nothing is as severe as you would like to see it. But you have to let this process take its course. We're going to take our steps, but try as much as you can to stay off of social media discussing your family's case. Try as much as you can to find other outlets, to seek counseling, to find solace in others who have had similar tragic things happen in their lives. But the process has to be allowed to take its course, even if ultimately the outcome is not what the victim's family want. But that's what I stress, and that's what we stress to the families of individuals who have been whose lives have been taken by very tragic and unexpected means.
Chelsea Perkins will be sentenced in September in federal court. This is all pending the acceptance of this plea arrangement. And right now she's looking at between 20 and 25 years in federal prison. What goes into the determination of whether a plea agreement that the prosecution and the defense have come to is actually accepted?
So judges, federal and state judges, are required by our state rules or by our ethical rules to carefully consider the legitimacy or the efficacy of a plea. And the types of things that we look into are whether or not the family of the victims, how they feel about the plea, whether the plea arrangement is fair as compared to the potential outcome of the charge itself. So, for example, if you have someone committing a murder and they're offering the equivalent of a jaywalking ticket, obviously those would far be unbalanced and would not likely be accepted, because if it's that much of a difference, then it probably shouldn't be a charge. Or if it is a legitimate charge, you have to have much heavier consequences. The other things you take into consideration, and on a larger picture, is this plea consistent with the facts of other similar cases in the jurisdiction? I mean, if the facts and circumstances of this case were exactly the same, but you had a defendant who was of a different demographic, perhaps an elderly individual, or perhaps a person of a different religion or a different race, and the prosecutor offered a vastly different plea to that person than they did to this, then that's something that the judge is supposed to take into consideration in whether to accept or reject the plea. Ultimately, the judge has that power. But I can also offer to you that in the vast majority of cases, when the prosecutor and the defense attorneys work out a plea, as judges, we generally accept those pleas, even if there is some critical scrutiny of the circumstances of it.
Right. Because Chelsea Perkins, she's 35 years old. And if she gets, 20 to 25 years, I mean, that's a big part of her life. I mean, that's not a small sentence, but she shot someone in the head in a national park who she lured to that national park based off of a motive that was never prosecuted because there wasn't enough evidence of it.
That is nuts. TikTok, they're getting mad at me, so y'all come over to YouTube. The Mystery Project. See you guys over there. TikTok being crazy as hell, y'all.
What do you make of that amount of time for what this crime actually is?
It's kind of what I suggested earlier. We talk about mitigation, but the opposite of mitigation is aggravating. And that's what I was suggesting, that the time that lapsed between when he allegedly raped her and the time she sought him out to kill him is aggravating more than it is mitigating. The act of the alleged rape itself would be mitigating as a reason to reduce the charge that she's facing. So they could balance themselves out, or the aggravation may be greater than the mitigation. But either way, those factors will be heavily considered by the court, and probably in a verbal journal entry discussing how the court arrived ultimately at whatever sentence she receives. and how those factors played into the ultimate sentence
These
between that
dang
20 and 25 years
knocking
that she's
cameras
going
over.
to receive.
Would you see a 25-year sentence here if you were a judge on this case as a fair sentence for all that we know at this point?
Well, you made a key statement, and it had about 5 words. You said, all that we know right now. I would say 6 words. All that we know right now. Based on what we know right now, would 25 years be fair? Of course it would. Would 20 years be fair? I suppose it would. And I guess that she was probably facing more time. And I have to believe she was probably facing an equal amount or maybe less time in the state, which is why the feds, they agreed to let the feds take it over. And that is potentially more actual time than in the state as well. But it was 25 years fair, I guess. I don't know her other criminal history. I do know that it became a bit sensational when they offered that she had an OnlyFans page, and that was her primary source of income. And her husband was retired, and they met in the Coast Guard. But OnlyFans, and they made a big bit about her being OnlyFans, because perhaps to some individuals who may be ultimately making the decision, that could be salacious and indicative of a lapse in moral character for her to be a part of OnlyFans, perhaps. But I would offer that I'm guessing that the federal judge involved here won't give that any sway. But what would be more impactful are what the victim's family have to say. I know the father got 3 years, but what the victim's family and perhaps his friends have to offer about his loss, what her criminal background or other actions that hinge on her character will say about what may be an appropriate sentence, and the details of the facts of the planning that she underwent in order to commit this crime in the first place. All of those will really tell the true story about what would be a fair sentence. But I, at this time, don't believe that 25 years, just based on the fact that she sought this guy out 4 years later, planned to meet up with him, took him off to a secluded area in a national park and shot him in the back of the head while he was unsuspecting. That certainly says to me, harsh penalty in 25 years would not be unreasonable in my opinion.
And then lastly, Judge, kind of talking about the OnlyFans page, because I looked at her Instagram and her last post was on the day before she was arrested in 2021. It was on December 9th. So for 5 months, she was still posting on social media. And I know it was her line of work, but just you've in your career, you've dealt with people accused of some very difficult things. Like, take us inside the mind of people who have committed acts like this. I mean, she shot someone in the head and she's going on with her everyday life as if you would never know that she was someone who had done this in a national park.
Right.
I mean, typically, what is in the minds of people who do these things where they're able to just kind of go back to what they were doing before from at least what we're seeing on social media?
Yeah, generally when we see people committing murders, we see two really drastically different mental positions. On one side, someone who is really remorseful and horribly guilty for what they do. Their kind of engagement is very clear. It's dark. It's sorrowful. It's, you see it. You can feel the hurt that they have inflicted, and they're troubled by it because they didn't want to do it. They are really just remorseful. And then on the other side, you see folks who feel that they were justified in their conduct. And when they feel justified in their conduct, everything about their conduct after the murder is exactly like it was before. In fact, it's a bit emboldened because they feel like, I planned this out. It was the right thing to do. I did it. And now I'm going on with my life. And in fact, I'm feeling better about my life because I accomplished something that I had planned to do. And I got vindication. And that's kind of what you see here. It's almost, and I don't know what other of her posts said, but certainly going back to a regular life, if it was exactly the same or significantly the same as it was beforehand, that almost suggests a rejection of responsibility or rejection of guilt. I mean, she didn't turn herself in, she didn't.
They had to go find her.
Confess after it happened and walk into a police station with their hands out saying, I just killed my rapist. No, she went back and she went about her regular life until through the great detective work of diligent law enforcement agents, it was discovered that she did all this planning and she's the one that carried it out and that she's the one that needed to be held accountable. So the OnlyFans postings and the return to her Instagram regular life is almost that second mindset of a rejection of the idea of guilt, because it was a planned act that was actually justifiable in her mind.
That is pretty damn crazy. I don't know. Y'all let me know what you think. Should we do a little bonus episode, y'all? Should we do a little live stream right now? Because I just saw another video talking about John O'Keefe was attacked by a dog, and it's the Karen Reed forensic expert. It's like a snippet of that. Let's get some thumbs up in the chat. You guys want to watch that? Should we watch that? You know what? I'm making the call. Let's do it. So check it out. John O'Keefe was attacked by a dog. The Karen Reed forensic expert. That's what she's saying. Make sure you like the video, y'all. Everybody hit the thumbs up for me. Subscribe if you're new. Let's jump into this one.
Is what the wounds you see on Exhibit 1 consistent or inconsistent with what you have seen from your experience with regard to motor vehicle accident victims?
Inconsistent.
Whoa.
If I could have published Exhibit 206, which is in evidence, Your Honor. Do you recognize Exhibit 206?
Yes.
Did you review that as part of any report in this case?
Yes.
And can you describe how you reviewed this document as part of your evaluation of this case?
Well, I reviewed the injuries, which are so this is a decedent, a picture of a decedent, a different case, not the decedent in this case, totally separate case.
And
So
is this from Dr. Welcher's report that you reviewed?
Yes.
All right, so continue, please.
And so this is a person deceased, looks like in the street, and he's got multiple injuries. And this is allegedly from an auto versus pedestrian accident.
So if we could, are you able to discern any injuries to any limbs from this? If you could zoom in on the limbs, Mr. Wolf, thank you.
So there is a very extensive degloving, partially degloving, avulsion injury to the forearm of this individual, the extensive skin loss, damage to the subcutaneous tissue, possibly damage to other tissues beneath that.
Oh, hell. Imagine being on the jury and she puts that picture up just to show that, no, this is what it looks like if you're struck by a vehicle. Oof.
And Mr. Wolk, if you could zoom back out and go to the list that is highlighted in the original of this. And Dr. Russell, can you tell me whether you evaluated the list, and if so, how did you evaluate that list in connection with the photo?
Well, the photo is limited only really to the upper chest and the right arm. And so I can't comment on any of the CAT scan findings here on this list. But this was a list of numerous traumatic injuries to this person. And regarding the arm, it says right upper extremity wound with vascular injury, clinical.
What does that mean, if anything, to you?
Whoa. Because that's like the big thing with this case too, right? Is that like like his body didn't look like it got hit, right? Like that's the big thing. Is they're like, oh, but look at these abrasions on his arm and stuff, and they're like, well, that looks like a dog did it. But other than that, it's like to be struck by a vehicle enough to end your life, like there's going to be some pretty significant damage. That's kind of the defense's thing too, isn't it?
Well, that suggests it's a soft tissue wound. However, what they're saying is clinical, so they're not commenting on if there were any X-ray findings, for instance, on an X-ray. But I mean, would be a post-mortem X-ray, and this is just a clinical diagnosis or a visual, hands-on diagnosis.
Do you know whether that line that you just read relates to any part of the photograph? Any part of the photograph?
Well, I believe it relates to that injury that we pointed out in the previous photograph.
Can you switch back to that, please, Mr. Wolf? And if you could just zoom in and just what does...
So this is the wound that they are talking about. It's a large gaping wound, soft tissue wound.
If we could go back to the list, please. Zoom in. Thank you.
But...
Please continue.
No. What I was going to say is that there are multiple other injuries in this person. Multiple serious, significant injuries, subdural hemorrhage, subarachnoid hemorrhage, intraventricular hemorrhage, liver laceration, pneumothorax. That's blood and air in the chest cavity outside of the lungs. So it's in an area where it shouldn't be. This person had numerous injuries.
Are you able to compare these injuries in that photo in this Exhibit 206?
She was a trauma doctor, wasn't she? She worked in the emergency room.
And did you compare them to your review of the autopsy report and other medical records of Mr. O'Keefe?
Sustained.
Answer the question? Oh.
No.
Okay.
You can take that down. From your review, did Mr. O'Keefe sustain any liver laceration?
No.
Did Mr. O'Keefe sustain any gaping, as you called it, lacerations to the right forearm?
No.
Did Mr. O'Keefe sustain any pneumothorax injuries that you were describing with regard to 206?
No pneumothorax.
This lady looks like she makes like the best like cup of tea you like ever had in your life. Like she looks so cool.
Let's switch to another topic. Let's talk about clothing of the decedent. In forming your opinion, did you consider Mr. O'Keefe's clothing in relation to his wounds?
Yes.
If we could, Your Honor, have Exhibit 150 in evidence published.
Okay.
Do you recognize what's depicted in Exhibit 150?
Yes.
And what is it?
It's a picture of part of the hoodie, sweatshirt or shirt that Mr. O'Keefe was wearing at the time.
And wearing when?
At the time of his death.
And did you evaluate this photo as part of your review of the autopsy report?
Yes.
And we're going to come back to this. If we could please switch to, Your Honor, 147C in evidence.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, hell.
And what is 147C?
So this is a close-up of the sleeve of that shirt that we just saw on the previous image. And there's a hole or defect here in the sleeve, which I'm circling with the pointer. And there's a label that labels it number 1. And
that looks like a tooth.
so I see this hole that is rather round and appears to have some fabric coming out of the hole towards the exterior of the jacket or the shirt.
Did you attribute any significance to the shape of the wound, and if so, what significance?
The shape of the hole, yes. So it's rounded. I actually attributed a lot of significance to that.
Describe a lot of significance that you attributed to this hole.
Well, I believe that this hole was made by a canine tooth, and with the tooth going into the shirt, reaching the skin, and then coming out of the shirt, pulling out some fabric with it.
I mean, would a piece of a tail light do that? I don't know. Y'all tell me. What do you think?
And we'll come back to this. If we could, Mr. Wolk, go to 147D as in David that's in evidence. Do you recognize this photo?
Yes.
What is it?
A round hole in the shirt, again with some fabric fibers pointing towards the outside of the shirt.
Is this the same hole that we just saw on 147C or a different hole?
Could we go back? I don't know.
Okay, so let's now go back to Exhibit 150. What significance, if any, do you give to the various triangles that are on the hoodie? Could you describe to the jury what those are and what's their...
I think that didn't the people that lived in the house that he was found in front of, didn't they have a dog? Or somebody that was in the house or something like that had a dog? Y'all tell me. I'm pretty sure, I think it's that house they had one. Like a police canine. Isn't that right? Somebody let me know. I don't remember.
purpose?
So
Oh, yes, and they got rid of it real quick. Okay, yeah, German Shepherd. They got rid of... Oh, Chloe. Yeah. That's right. And so they got rid of the dog real quick afterwards.
triangles are labels that were placed by either the police or the crime lab or someone, and the point of the triangle generally is pointing towards a hole in the shirt. As you can see, there are multiple ones here, and I want to make sure that you don't confuse it with this rather large defect, which is caused by something else.
So let's start with each one, and we'll go through these quickly. Let's start and zoom in on number 1. What did you conclude about the source of that hole?
The neighbors
in the
confirmed
hood?
it too. Yup.
Sustained.
Did you evaluate what is depicted as number 1 in that slide as part of your review?
Yes.
And what was your evaluation?
So
Sustained.
that's a zoom right there.
Let's go back and
That's some
zoom
zoom
out.
action.
Have you, in your career, examined clothing either as part of your forensic pathology practice or your emergency medicine practice to determine the source of defects in clothing?
Yes.
How many times have you done that approximately in your career?
Several hundred.
And have you, in those several hundred times, have you ever had to reach a conclusion as to whether there was any connection between defects in clothing and wounds to humans?
Many times.
Can you give some examples of the many times you've had to look at clothing and defects in clothing to assist you in determining wound recognition in a human?
Yes. So let me clarify. It's mostly used in forensic pathology, not so much in emergency medicine. The clothing and the cause of the wound is as important as in emergency medicine as the treatment of the wound. But in forensic pathology, it's a key component to any examination where you think that it was an unnatural death. So, so I've done it in gunshot wounds, in stab wounds, multiple times. Looking at the defects, looking at the direction of the, of what I think the bullet, bullet track was, determining entry and exit wounds. In stab wounds, I've utilized them to help determine offensive and defensive wounds or injuries. So yes, many times.
Have you ever performed that analysis? You mentioned, testified earlier, 500 to 1,000 evaluations of dog-inflicted wounds on humans. Have you ever performed the analysis of defects in clothing and compared them to wounds on humans in the context of dog-inflicted wounds on humans?
I don't think so. Perhaps in that one.
Well, yes. So in terms of, have there been any instances of doing that in your career? Have you done that at all in your career?
Maybe that one child.
All right. So let's go now.
Man, would they do cut her mic off too?
To
And they're gonna try to do anything they can to not let this lady's defense be heard, huh? What is that? The hell is that sound?
You were discussing.
Just hey, turn her mic off and then play the buzzer sound for 10 seconds. Really throw off the jury. What is going on? We've watched how many cases? Hundreds of cases.
What the fuck?
And I've never seen anything like that happen.
How dare you?
That is crazy. I mean, sometimes the audio is terrible, but the audio is terrible for everybody. You know what I mean? Not this one. They said, cut her mic off. Cut her mic off. Turn her. Get the mic.
The defects in the arm.
That is nuts.
As well as the wounds in the arm and then the defects in the clothing. In terms of back to Exhibit 1.
No, that wasn't me. Okay, no. My sound effects make sense.
In terms of that pattern that is in the arm, and in terms, let's go back to the hoodie. I'll strike that. Have you, in your career, in the terms of evaluating motor vehicle accidents, have you evaluated the clothing of victims of motor vehicle accidents?
Yes.
How many times roughly have you evaluated what clothing looks like in terms of motor vehicle accidents?
Well, in many cases, I had to cut off the clothing in the emergency department, so I observed the clothing then, and then in the post-mortem cases, I evaluated the clothing, but oftentimes sometimes it wasn't helpful.
Have you ever evaluated clothing in determining whether or not the defects in the clothing are consistent or inconsistent with a motor vehicle accident? Have you ever evaluated that as a forensic pathologist?
Not specifically.
Right. And in terms of your observations in either emergency medicine or forensic pathology, have you ever observed defects from motor vehicle accidents in clothing?
Yes.
is what is depicted in this exhibit consistent or inconsistent with a motor vehicle accident?
Sustained.
I was about to say. That is crazy. Wow, how would that be sustained? He's basically saying you've looked at things in the past that were the cause of motor vehicle accidents, and is this consistent? Is what you're seeing right here, is it consistent with a motor vehicle accident? Objection. Sustained.
In determining, let's go back to Exhibit 1, please. In determining and reaching your opinion with regard to the source of these wounds, is it necessary for you to reach that opinion to see a specific dog to determine whether the wounds are from a dog in general?
No.
And in your experience that you talked about earlier today, the 500 to 1,000, was it ever necessary in that experience to go locate the dog, to see the dog, to treat or evaluate the patient?
No.
Why is it, well, in terms of, we're going to move to another category, studies. Did you review any studies informing your opinions in this case?
Can we put the lights on and take this?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Yes.
Yes, many.
And did those studies that you review support or not support your conclusions in this case?
Sustained.
Which studies did you rely upon?
Well, I reviewed quite a few, 10 to 20 in depth, and I relied a lot on 2 of the articles.
Do you recall the names of the lead authors in the studies that you said, that you just referenced?
Yes, one of them was Demuniak.
Could you spell that, please?
I wish. DEMUNNYCK, I believe.
And was there...
And then there was another one, Pollack, Pollack.
Man, that lady is smart as... That is crazy. Do you remember the articles that you read and the authors' names? Yes, I believe it's spelled like this, and I believe it's spelled like this. Whoa. I can't even remember what I had for lunch. Actually, I can.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, my recollection is correct. We've already pre-marked as exhibits for identification these studies, 2 studies. I may be incorrect in that. If so, I have studies. I'm going to show them to Mr.
Yeah, this is the defense attorney.
Yes, thank you. So we can just make sure I have all the pages.
Yeah, sustained like the jury didn't hear it. Exactly. She's crazy. And she likes to throw that in there too. Sustained. Strike that from the record. Oh, okay.
Okay. If I can just have a moment.
You what?
Okay, I got it. You should have. If I could have marked for identification as one document, please.
Exhibit PPP for ID.
One more, Madam Court Reporter, thank you.
And exhibit QQQ for ID.
Mr. Unless you would.
I think I can fast forward it.
Dr. Russell, I have provided you with those two exhibits. I would ask you to just briefly take a look at them and let me know whether you recognize those as the articles that you were referencing before.
Oh, here it goes. TikTok, come over to YouTube. The Mystery Project on YouTube, y'all. Come on over. The Mystery Project. We're live right now. You can see the video. The Mystery Project. Come on over. TikTok being crazy as hell, like always. All right, let's finish this off.
Yes.
Now let's start out with the Munich study. Is that exhibit PPP?
PP.
Right. So is this the study that you referenced earlier in your testimony?
Yes.
Can you briefly describe for the jury how that study related to the opinions in the case?
Objection. Sustained.
Are these
Oh my
the
God.
studies that you cite to as a basis for support for your opinions in this case?
Yes.
And is QQQ a study that also supports your opinion in this case?
Yes.
Now, in terms of your conclusions with regard to, if we can go back once more to exhibit number 1. With regard to your opinion on the cause of these injuries, can you once again state your opinion as to the cause of these injuries?
I believe these injuries were caused by a dog attack.
So I'm going to strike that word.
Yeah, so Dr. Russell, if you could, with regard to bite parlance, can you state what your opinion is with regard to
I'm gonna strike that.
bite? So do you have an
Nobody even
opinion as to
objected.
what caused these injuries?
Yes. I believe that these injuries are the result of dog bites and or claw marks.
And do you hold that opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes.
That is all the questions I have for this witness at this time.
I don't know. Y'all tell me what you think. Tell me what you think. Leave it in the comments. Did John O'Keefe get attacked by a dog? Did Karen Reed do it? I don't know. I wasn't there. But certainly seems I don't know, it's crazy, y'all. It is a crazy case. Make sure you like the video, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see y'all tomorrow.